Let me double click here. Okay, so let me go back to page 1. Okay. Can you all see this? Okay, awesome. All right. Well, welcome to my DMP transitional research project Prospectus. And the title of my project of this presentation is First Responders with Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. And the ultimate goal is to create a nursing clinical guide for the emergency department staff, mainly nurses. And so let me give you a little background on where I'm coming from with this project. So as you are quite familiar to the emergency department, Dr. Han, that this department is an entry level to the hospital, and almost every hospital that has an emergency department is an intricate part of the hospital for entry and an entry level. So mainly for patients experiencing crisis, these individuals are taken to the emergency department for best chances of survival. All crises, small or big, at this level of care demand immediate attention from the ED registered nurses and the interdisciplinary team that work in this department. So I am considering these individuals, these nurses, as first responders because this is the job that they are responding to. They are the first to see these patients that rode in on the gurney, on these stretchers by EMT. So these are the nurses that who are responding to patients who are entering into either the trauma level care in the ED or just the regular emergency care entry. Emergency department nurses are experts in emergency resuscitative care to veterans, not veterans, sorry, I'm used to working with the veterans, to victims of the aftermath of catastrophic events. It could be a motor vehicle accident, it could be gunshot, a mass shooting out there. These nurses, the expertise and their experience in this area is highly valuable. Nurses can be found multitasking essential roles to revive patients. And like I said, their knowledge and expertise in their general health in this area is quite valuable. And to also mention not just their physical health, but their mental well-being as well. Okay, so my research question is, are first responder nurses in the emergency department exposed to trauma? And are they at risk for developing post-traumatic stress disorder? And my research, my title is the population will be first responder nursing staff in the emergency department. Intervention would be to screen these first responders for signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And to the comparison would be to see how consistent is the literature on the care of these individuals, nursing staff who are exposed to PTSD. And the ultimate outcome would be to the impact, not the ultimate outcome, but the impact of this, of PTSD on these nurses is what I want to find out, to see, you know, how when they are exposed to trauma, they develop PTSD, what is the outcome of of their situation. Now, the objectives for my translational research project is to unveil the prevalence of PTSD in first responder nurses in the ED, to identify risk factors that are inherent to the emergency department first responders for developing PTSD, to use the Newman system model of care to guide the project, to utilize the trauma-informed care model as well to in the care of emergency department first responder nurses. I also like to develop the clinical guideline, a nursing clinical guideline for these individuals. I just don't want to just study them, do the screening, but in the end, formulate a nursing care guideline that will be able to help our ED nurses progress through their career, have a functional lifestyle out of work, and when they do come to work, be able to function adequately and to their best potential for patient safety, for the organization, and to prevent any other impact that PTSD could have on them. So focus on the first responders, nurse first responders. So the emergency department, as we know, is 24/7, 7 days a week. There is no weekend off, no holidays off. And these providers in this setting are providing care to all ages that walk through the doors. And it's the multidisciplinary team approach for these patients. We have nurses, doctors, paramedics, physician, student physicians, and even nurses aid that work in this area. But nurses having to be the frontline care providers in this area for the crisis that walk into their care on a daily basis. So based on what I'm seeing in the literature currently, and looking at what I've been provided on the background of the nurses at Emory University, where I'm looking forward to doing this transitional research project, the nature of this emergency medicine have shown that nurses are at risk of developing burnout symptoms, stress syndrome, and also symptoms of trauma as a result of the environment they work in and the demand on the job demand they have to contend to. So when left untreated, PTSD have been found to have an array of both mental and socio-economic impact on first responders. And those impacts range from disability to suicide. We don't want to wait to reach the level of suicide, and which I see here in my clinical experience with the veterans. We don't want to wait to see that level incline in the nursing staff and the disability that can be a result of that. So those are areas that I want to really hit on during my project. So the problem here, and I've already repeated some of these, are the burnout symptoms and syndromes that can be a result of these mental health problems, work-related stress, and trauma symptoms as well. So the first, the initial impact on of PTSD on the ED nurse is said to really hit during their initial career phase, and that would result into turnover rate and nursing staffing problem for the organization. So one study gave an example of the first year financial toll that nursing turnover can have on the organization, and gave an estimate of $100,000 annually on an organization if nurses quit at a rate of 4 nurses quitting at the same time during a fiscal year. So the project looks at public concerns. I'll be looking at public concerns that result from PTSD, such as patient death as a result of nursing errors, drug aversions, suicide rate among ED nurses. I'll be looking to see how these literature informations are realistic to today's nursing population, especially at Emory University. So one may say, what is PTSD? You keep mentioning PTSD. PTSD, in definition, is a psychological disorder that results from exposure to traumatic events, with symptoms persisting from intense distress, fearful avoidance of reality, and that reality may be the job environment where this nurse may be returning to, and reminders that are triggering the events over and over within the individual. And these individuals will have alternation in their mood, cognition. They will have a perceived sense of imminent danger and threat to their lives because of their trauma exposure, and that hypervigilance that keep them so highly alert that they're not able to focus and stay within the moment because their mind is on that traumatic exposure that they continue to have in their workplace. So the systematic literature review I've conducted are up to 18 studies that I have reviewed. These are on the ED, first responder nurses in the emergency care environment. So from 2012 to 2019, the literatures are showing a good bit of information on from a descriptive study, from descriptive studies, cross sectional studies, randomized control trials that have been conducted by these studies are showing some results that lingered with the ED nursing in a first responders role. So some of these studies have been done in universities, in hospitals, and just healthcare centers around the nation. Some have also been done internationally from a global stage to see how first responders in the emergency department, how PTSD is impacting their daily lives and their professional role. So the samples that I looked at initially were comprehensive, looking at physicians, paramedics, nurses, and EMS firefighters. So now at this point, I'll be narrowing down more and more on the review to really focus intensely on nursing staff. Next year, the interventions that have been done in these studies have ranged from social adjustment, skill assessment of these nurses with symptoms of burnt out or trauma symptoms. Face-to-face surveys have been done in these studies, and a generalized literature review, systematic literature reviews as well. So the findings from these studies have ranged from trauma to PTSD risk factors in relation to ED nurses, income, whether it be low income versus high income background, and also other countries around the world. Like I said, there have been international studies to see how if income status is a matter, those socioeconomic background of the nurse, if that plays a role in addition to trauma exposure. And moving on, limitation to some of these studies have been the means of data collection. Those data collection that were self-reported has some limitation to the outcome of the study. And also if the data was collected just from one institution versus having a broader sense of view for the study. So that tells me that I should not limit my data collection and or my screening just to one nurse, but actually have a well-rounded interviewing and screening of the entire ED staff nurses. All right, so this is the trauma-informed care that I mentioned. Trauma-informed care provide a guide for screening for adverse experiences that trauma and personality as a result of individual with trauma history. So that this model of care goes into empowerment, focuses on strengthening the individual, and building a safe relationship base for this individual who have been exposed to certain level of trauma and have developed PTSD. So in other words, it's non-judgmental, and it brings on a sense of caring and patient-centered care. I should say individualized centered care. Not all measures fit everyone, but every individual is taken separately from the group of individuals that suffer from PTSD. So in other words, when you meet an individual nurse who has had trauma exposure, his or her experience will not be the same as the next nurse. So getting to know that nurse experience and helping that nurse deal with his or her experience from the personal view of that nurse is the trauma informed care model that I think would definitely work for these individuals. And so lastly, the DMP essentials that will be utilized here and that will be helpful during this project would be essential 5, 6, and 8. So looking at public healthcare policies and advocating for healthcare is essential 5, and then 6 is that interprofessional collaboration, because this is not going to be just myself doing this project. I'll be working with my DMP committee team, you guys, and I'll also be working with individuals from Emory University, including Dr. Han, and everyone else that will be coming along to help me understand the system and progress well. And the essential 7 now will be clinical prevention, population health improvement. So this population of nurses to help improve their condition, work condition, and their individual mental well-being. So that would be that essential 7 to help in this process. So I received some good information from Dr. Hunt regarding Emory University, how big this hospital is, 700 plus beds, with 50 beds in the ED. So they serve up to, or even more than that, 50,000 patients annually. So we're talking about a massive amount of patients coming through their ED department to be served. Looking at 110 emergency department nurses in this location, including, in addition to the physician, the residency program physician that come from that arena to be part of this team. And see. And I took Emory University mission statement and included it into this presentation because I see that part of the mission statement is to serve humanity by improving health. So if we can improve the health of our nurses, who are actually the role runners of patient care in this area, we would be fulfilling part of this mission as well. And staff and physicians all over Emory University. So just being able to help the nurses cope with any of these problems with PTSD, that would be a fulfillment of this mission as well. And these are my references. Any questions?
So I had just a couple. What tool are you looking to measure, or are you going to use to measure screen for PTSD? Have you identified that yet, or?
Okay, I'm going to go back in my presentation here.
Yeah.
Looking at the trauma and loss spectrum self-report.
Okay.
That's a tool. Another tool would be the work and social adjustment skill. So those two are being highly recommended in screening, and not to forget the Copenhagen burnout inventory. So since I'm looking at burnout, I'm looking at stress, I'm looking at PTSD, I think I'm going to be looking at getting a good idea from these three skills to do the measurement.
Okay. I guess my thoughts, and maybe Dr. McCrae, Dr. Adams could chime in, is it's going to be a lot to try to use, I think, 3 separate tools for your project. So you probably want to identify, maybe pick out which one you think is going to be most applicable to your kind of what you're wanting to assess for in your intervention.
I completely agree, and I just assumed that you had listed those because those were ones that you had ran into in your literature review, and you probably haven't narrowed it down to the best one that fits with your project yet. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, that's okay. It's you're still kind of early, so at the same time. So the only other thing that
many to choose from.
Yeah, I realized there were that many either. The other thing that you might want to look back, I think it was on slide, flip to slide 9 maybe. Let me see. Go back one more. It was about the cost of turnover.
Okay.
Wherever that was, it may have been before that. So anyways, the cost of turnover, I think you had, that's it right there on your, I guess your 4th bullet point down, was $100,000 annually for every 4 nurses.
Yeah.
Leaving. It's actually, I think, I'm not sure what your reference was for that, the year, whatever, but it's closer, just for a med-surg nurse now that leaves during their first year of professional practice, you're upwards of around 70,000. So when you get into specialized areas such as the emergency department, critical care settings, and the ER, it's upwards of usually around 95 to over $100,000 per nurse that has at least 1 year of experience.
Okay.
So there's a ton of literature out there on that.
Okay.
And A1 might be a good source too to get some of that about turnover data.
Okay.
The American Association of Nurse or American Organization of Nurse Executives.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Forgive me if you said this already, or maybe you're not there yet. How did you plan on collecting the data? Were you going to go there or email, or how are you going to do this?
I'm planning on making site visits with Dr. Hunt and run that way too. I'm going to be doing both.
So as you start to, as you get I'm just thinking how you're going to collect your data though. Are you planning on doing that by paper or probably electronic so you can hit? Because I can tell you, if you're able to translate the tool that you decide to use and put it on, make it like an electronic survey, whether that be through SurveyMonkey or some tool like that, it would probably be easier to capture your data for you. Okay. It would be certainly easier to disseminate your survey because otherwise, it's going to be hard to catch if you're just using here as your site to collect your data. It's going to be kind of hard to get that without being here several days a week because we do of course 12-hour shifts, 7A to 7A, some mid shifts, and some people just work weekends. And I'm just thinking your participation, the population would be a little bit higher for you.
Okay.
It's good though to put a face with it. I did my dissertation on a similar topic, and I did it through email, and most of the people that did it did not know me, so I got a little pushback of like, why is this stranger asking me all these questions? So it'd be good if they had a face, or at least somebody could say, oh yeah, I met her.
Yeah. So we do we do one thing that would maybe make it pretty easy too is we do staff meetings, and we do staff meetings usually, well, let's be honest, I'm not as good at that as I'm supposed to. Probably quarterly or so. And what we can do, we actually do those via Zoom. We do one in person, and then the rest are done via Zoom. So you would be able to easily kind of participate with those.
Okay. Great ideas. Awesome.
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
Will you let her know when the next one is coming up?
Yeah, I can do that. We don't have one scheduled anytime right now. But when we can easily schedule it when you get ready to kind of start to get ready to disseminate your survey and collect your data.
Okay.
Which will be spring of 2020. So. Yeah,
so we can make that work.
Okay.
It seems a long way away, but it will be here.
It's not.
I think you have a great topic, and you've done a lot of work on it. It's come a long way from the first day I met you and you told me about it.
Yeah.
We are very fortunate and blessed to have Dr. Hahn and Emory to help you with access to this great group of ER nurses, and to have Dr. Adams' input, especially since her dissertation was on a similar topic. What was your dissertation?
It wasn't on PTSD, it was on job embeddedness, what keeps people working. And so you want to avoid the burnout and the turnover. So I had a lot of your similar figures in my proposal and dissertation.
And I'm sorry, I'm just bringing this information to Dr. Hunt and Dr. Adams. I think by now Dr. McCray knows. So when we started the DMP program and I was wondering what to do for my project, it dawned on me that I needed to do something about PTSD because of personal history. I volunteered for Ebola and went to Liberia for 6 weeks. And I came back and realized that I was struggling with an issue with the things I've seen, during the care of patients that I had. So just struggling with that and coming to work back and forth, no one knows what I'm struggling with at all. And I believe that there are many nurses in my shoes who never says to anyone what they're going through. And it may be because of fear to lose their job, fear to be labeled, to be stigmatized, so many other reasons. But yet you have that struggle that you have every day you show up to work, and no one knows that. But if there's someone who cares enough and it's not going to jeopardize your job, it's just so that you can have that treatment and or just the therapy you need to be the nurse you always wanted to be and continue your career and have a longevity, then I think that all nurses across the board, regardless of them not working in the ED, wherever they work at, if they have any past trauma exposure or exposures that's hindering their work today, they should get help. So that's where I come from picking this topic, because we love our job and we should be able to stay in it regardless of what our environment has to do with it. So.
That's a great story to share. I think you need a slide with some of those key points on it so that you can talk that important,
Okay.
because that's why you chose this topic. That's what makes you passionate about it. And I had a similar slide in mine in the example I had sent you. My story is nothing like that though, but my topic was not this touching either. But I think you need that slide in there to bring those points across to whomever you're presenting to at the time.
Okay.
There's also, you can probably Google it. There's a lot of other things that you can relate to the PTSD. For example, compassion fatigue. There's actually here at Emory, there's the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. You can just Google that and get a little bit more information, but there might be some resources that you could look at there. And I think you could certainly figure out a way to tie that back into your certainly your PTSD screen and whatnot. Okay. So there's a lot of resources they offer just about compassion training and whatnot.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have anything else to add? Do you have any questions for us, Nyempu?
No, not this time.
Okay.
Great work.
Thank you. Thank you for taking out of your busy hours
Sure.
to me. Appreciate all your care.